I asked Kevin about the early days, the problems he discovered and the rigs he developed to try and solve them.
I think our knowledge of rigs has gone through the roof when I first started. It was really meagre then. In fact, our understanding has turned 180 degrees. Then we was led to believe that carp wouldn't take any form of resistance. So our rigs primarily were free lining. We used to use a main line, pass it through baits like potatoes or specials with a baiting needle, then tie the hook on and put it back in. The hook also had to be embedded in the bait, so the carp couldn't see or feel it, because again we was led to believe if they felt the hook, they dropped the bait. Free lining kind of restricted the distance we could cast, and also the rods didn't help either. This is the day the Mark IV fiberglass started coming in, and we started really getting into rod development using C-rod type blanks. So we had the rods to cast further, so we experimented with running rigs, using leads, so we could get our baits out a lot further. But again, resistance was the key concentration. Leads with tails, so for minimum resistance, so the fish didn't feel anything and they picked up the bait. The 70s was an amazing time in carp fishing. In fact, I would say it was probably the beginning of this new era. Then I was lucky enough to be invited into the BCSG. That's, if you like, was an elite group of carp anglers. You got to remember then that there wasn't magazines around. The BCSG printed their own magazine, and we regularly had meetings. So these were hotbeds, of innovation, where all like-minded souls got together, just talking carp really. It was in one of the BCSG mags when Fred Wilton wrote his theories of HMV baits, which, as I said, changed everything. The boilie. The difference it made to our takes and success on lakes was amazing. Amazingly then, we didn't think we could catch carp unless we pre-baited. So we'd pre-bait a lake for a week or two, then move on, and bang, straight away we'd be into them. The other interesting thing was we always caught the lake's bigger fish first. This is when I learned that fish really can and do know what's good for them, and that's kind of stayed with me today. With Nash bait, we always optimise quality. As it's proven, it makes a difference. So what would happen then, we'd just move on to water after we baited it, catch the big fish quickly, and so we was always moving on to other waters. I now realise, looking back, that the carp never really got a chance to suss us on rigs because we didn't stay long enough. Then I moved on to a water in Essex that had at the time one of the biggest fish around. Normal thing, baited it, and we caught from day one. Only exception here was that I never got the big girl I was after, and we caught really well right up to winter. So I started again the next year. We baited, the season kicked off, had a good number of fish, but results just dramatically fell away. And for the rest of the season, all I really got was twitches. Never got another take, if I remember, after the end of June. So Where was I? I think I was talking about the Resi, second season, started baiting. Well, we did bait, and we started catching from the off, but very quickly results petered off. Don't think I caught a fish after June, and that's how it was right up until that winter when we pulled off. Just bleeps, twitches, but you know, no more takes. Never really sussed what was going on then. So next season, our same usual approach, baited up again. So this time, I never even got a take. I think a good friend of mine, Stuart, had a couple on opening day, and that was it. Something clear was going wrong. I remember saying to someone at the time, you know, because bear in mind, I said that first season we caught right up to winter, and then everything changed. It's as if they went to night school in the winter, you know, and started sussing us.
The hair rig was, and still is, one of the biggest breakthroughs in carp fishing, and Kevin quickly used this to his advantage.
And then the next season, the same thing started happening again. Take rate slowly started falling away, back to twitches, bleeps, but no screaming takes. It was at this time I hit on dental floss. Prior to that, we was using mono hook links and thick Dacron hook links. I think the brand was all on was Black Spider. But I just picked up a spool of dental floss one day. I just felt it's so subtle and fine. I was getting £10 breaking strain out of it on the scows, and in those days again we only fished a lot lighter line than today. So I tied up my side hook baits with that, and it got the take rate marginally going up again. I got a few more fish, but by that winter it had died away again, kind of back to square one. Then I had a bit of luck because of the fact I was in the BCSG and so tapped into the grapevine. I heard about the hair rig that close season. We've got another take now. It was the hair rig that changed everything really. I think it changed the evolution of carp. You know, you got a fish that for centuries, decades, millennium, whatever, it's been swimming around, testing things all day with no problem. If you watch carp in a tank, they're sucking and blowing stones out all day, constantly on the search for food. And our original baits with the hooks buried, they could still get away with them, suck them in, and if they never felt any resistance, they'd move off. I think like a flock of chickens, one would catch a bit of food and run away, and that's how we got the takes. But if they felt something they didn't like, a bit of resistance from the line maybe, they could blow it out without harm. And then this bare hook rig comes out, which meant every time they sucked a boilie in, suddenly they could easily get pricked by the bare hook. Then we used to tie it off the centre of the bend with a bit of fine mono. In fact, I remember thinking now, the first time I saw the rig, I thought, oh, that looks complicated and a nightmare. And I wasn't really enthusiastic about it. But I tied one out, chucked it out, and I think half an hour I had a take on that water where, like I said, nothing else was working. Side hooking worked for a while, but then when the hair rig came out, everything changed forever. Can't compare the two methods really. A few years ago, out of interest, I tried to experiment with side hooking again. Just couldn't even get a take. It's so different from a rig that presents a literal bare hook. So every time they suck that rig in, if you've got it right, a sharp hook is going to prick them. It's interesting history, the hair rig. It was a guy called Lenny Middleton who come up with it. At the time he fished with a very well-known angler from the 80s, Kevin Maddox. They set up a huge aquarium in the front room and just played around with rigs until Lenny come up with the hair rig. It's called the hair rig because originally they tied the hair with human hair. The difference a hair rig made is just difficult to understand unless you was there in those days. It was a huge leveller. We was really experienced carp anglers, and I have to say we got a little bit miffed when newcomers to the sport would turn up on our waters. boilies were coming out then from Richworth. They'd stick one on this hair rig they read about in the magazine and catch as much as us. You know, it was just amazing, the difference it made. With the hair rig in the first 2 weeks of that season, I recollect I had something like 40 fish, including the one I wanted. And then I heard about Silver End, which is where I eventually caught the Essex record. So despite the fact I was really having it off, I just pulled up sticks and went to Silver End. And at Silver End I started catching from day one. In fact, I can still remember it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, a full moon, and I had a take and landed a mirror about 18, 19 pound, just laying on the gravel, blowing in that catcher, watching the moon. There's nothing like that first fish, that first take on a lake to get your confidence going. I did really well at Silver End. Caught right up to winter, although I did detect towards autumn, when I should have really been having it off, results petered off. Started getting a lot more bleeps and twitches, whereas before that the only indication I got was an absolute screamer. But I still get a share of takes in between, so I was happy. But I did have that nasty little feeling that again the carp were beginning to suss me on the rigs. I had a really lucky time at Silver End. When I first got on there, no one else had really heard about it. So I had the baits, I had the hair rig, I had a massive opportunity to fish it how I wanted and really catch some fish. And I always said in that situation, if you're first onto water and you get some fish under your belt, it gives you a massive edge over other people when they arrive. And really I was the only one catching. My confidence was at a massive high. But Silver End got me thinking. I began to realise that I was getting away with it again, despite the fact I was catching well. What was bothering me was the twitches and the bleeps and the blanks between the takes. Other friends in the BCSG were also, talking in the same way. So we got our heads together, constantly talking about the hair rig and how we could improve it. I can't remember who came up with the idea. It certainly wasn't me. But someone came up with the idea of moving the hinge point round, so kind of opposite the point of the eye. That's where you pinned the hair down with a piece of, in those days we used electrical tube, shrink tubes used now. Changing the hair anchor point made a significant difference and was ahead of the game. And that's a rig we used for the next few years. We had our share of blanks, but generally I think, looking back, we'd put that down to the old thing, the carp aren't having it, conditions aren't right. But in reality, now when I look back, without doubt the carp were doing me. I've learned and have a kind of saying now that motivates me in my carp fishing. It can't always be literal, because there is times when the carp aren't feeding, like the middle of winter, but the thing that keeps me driving, and I think it's one of the main reasons why I'm a consistent catcher, I have this kind of saying: if I haven't caught a carp in 12 hours, I'm fishing like an idiot. In other words, I assume that carp are always feeding at least once every 12 hours, so I should have caught them.